The game needs you. Let me say this here. One short little thing. We're going through stop. We went through detention. Let's talk about arrest. Let's assume Antoine gets arrested. Let's assume that one of the guys is walking away. They drop something. Or let's assume they search Antoine's bag and they find something that's illegal. He's arrested. Let's not assume any of that. Let's do it like this. Let's assume they arrest Antoine. What's the difference between a detention and an arrest? See, if they detain you, you're not free to leave. That's really what the crux of a detention is. You're not free to leave. You can't walk away. Like when they request, hey, can I talk to you? No, you don't. I don't need to talk to you. What do you need to talk to me for? I'm gone. I'm walking away. Stop. Don't move. Freeze. Now you're not free to leave. Now, in order for them to touch you, they have to have fear, suspicion, reasonable suspicion. That's the standard. Articulable and reasonable suspicion. That's the standard. And then, in order for them to pat you down, to look for something, or pat you down, that pat down is only supposed to be for weapons. All right. So when they pat you down, they're saying, I'm patting you down for weapons, but they feel one bag, one small glassine fold in your pocket. They want to reach in your pocket and pull out a nickel bag of marijuana and say, look what I found. That's not what they're looking for. There's no weapon that's small. I mean, what are they going to say? You're going to attack them with a Gillette razor. You should shave today. No, that pat down is a Terry stop, and it means then they have to have a suspicion of or a fear of something that would allow them to pat you down for weapons, not for a search. Once you are in the process of a search, then that is a totally different animal. That's your Fourth Amendment in full effect now. That's why you have search and seizure in the Fourth Amendment. In order for them to search you, they have to have probable cause. At that point, you are supposed to be under arrest. That means they're using a show of force against you. That means you're not free to leave. That means that they are asserting the police authority and you are going along with that police authority. If they grab you by your arm and move you from one area to the next, that means you can't break off and run. You are under arrest at that point. So when you're asking them, am I under arrest, which is what we have a tendency to do. Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? We love to ask that particular question. What'll decide that is when you get in court and whatever it is that they're charging you with and saying that they found on you, you're challenging that in your motion to suppress. The question for the court will be, when you searched that person or when you found your item or whatever, did you have probable cause to search that person? Because at that point, he was under arrest. That's a seizure under the law. That means you have to comply with the standard. And again, I'm telling you what the law is, but I'm also telling you beware that the narrative will change by virtue of how they perceive your conduct and how they perceive you. Because believe me, sometimes you get the best and the brightest in every profession, and sometimes you get the weakest. People don't know they're behind from an elbow when they're doing their reports or whatever. So always read the reports, read them copiously, get every piece of discovery, especially when you know that they are violating the law, especially when you know that they had no reason to open Antoine's bag. They had absolutely no reason to go in Antoine's bag. At that point, you know that search is potentially illegal, but a judge or a court will have to decide whether or not whatever they found in the bag was illegally seized and whether or not Antoine was illegally seized. But they believe they can get away with that. Most jurisdictions believe they can get away with that because of perception. Please don't ever let perception get out of the way. My phone is just buzzing off the hook, so I have to answer a couple of questions before we get out of here. And they're pretty good. Let me deal with this one first, because this is probably the crux question. I don't want to leave this one hanging. This is from a lawyer. I'm not going to tell you what state he's from, but I think I might know this cat. Heard your show last week. Are you suggesting that a white lawyer cannot represent black defendants? Wow. All right, so those of you who know me, I hope you know that as the white folks always say, some of my best friends are white lawyers. Ain't that what they always say about us? Some of my best friends are black. Trump's wife said that the other day. We even got a Jewish lawyer. We can't be prejudiced. I said, wow, amazing. I don't really care if a person is white or black as a lawyer. It doesn't really matter to me. You know what matters to me? Cultural understanding. You know what I mean? It's like me coming into, you coming into my neighborhood and you don't have any clue what the rules are. And then you start telling me how we're going to maneuver in my neighborhood. But I know all the rules and you don't know any of the rules. You don't know what makes me tick. You don't know why I catch the bus at Mendowman instead of walking over to North Avenue at the mall. You don't have a clue why I would rather go around the block than cut across the street. You don't have a clue what goes on in my neighborhood, but you're sitting around telling me how you're going to defend my case. So no, it's not that I don't think white lawyers cannot defend black kids. I think that white lawyers who are defending black kids, who aren't taking the time to get invested in the community that the black kids come from, are doing the kids a disservice, because you can't communicate with that kid on a level that kid needs to be communicated on. You can't read Sigmund Freud and understand what it is to be black in Elizabeth, New Jersey. You can't read Tim Wise and think that you understand that you're a white liberal and you understand what it is to grow up in Newark, New Jersey, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Baltimore, Maryland, Southeast DC. You are going to have to take my word for it when I'm the defendant as to how I'm treated on the block. Because think about it. If I'm telling you that every time I walk down the street, these cops are stopping me, and then they finally stop me one day and they allegedly find drugs. If you don't understand that they're stopping me every day and I'm not going to be stupid enough to walk around carrying drugs because they stop me every day, then you're doing me a disservice. Because you're going to be telling me, well, the officer said, that he found 3 vials of cocaine. This brother, he stops me every day. I had a kid the cop used to just dump his books out on the train. I used to get on the train to go to college, just dump his books out. And so the kid, a couple of times, had another kid follow him. So every time the cop would do it, this kid would be taking photos of it. Eventually, one day, the cop runs through the neighborhood. He sees the kid. A bunch of kids up against the wall. He takes the drugs. He gives it to this kid because he's pissed off that this kid is mouthing off at him at the train station. Eventually, the kids come to trial, and I got pictures of this officer dumping his stuff out at the train station. So these acts were allowed to be admitted by the judge after a real serious fight, but it demonstrated for a jury that the officer had it in for this particular kid. But knowing the community and knowing what the kid is talking about and knowing that this goes on regularly and knowing that these guys, that they have these kind of cops in your neighborhood, knowing who the good cop is and knowing who the bad cop is, knowing that you have a cop that will testify and tell the truth versus one that will not testify, that will testify and say whatever is necessary to get a conviction, or will give you enough charges to where he figures you're going to take a plea anyway. You're not going to fight this. Is important if you're representing a young black defendant or a black defendant of any kind. So understanding their language and where they come from is of paramount importance. So if you're going to represent black people, especially black kids in the hood, you need to have an understanding of where they come from. They don't need to have an understanding of where you come from. Believe me, they go to public school, so they know where you come from. They know rules. They know white culture and they know black culture. It's the old thing in the black community. Say every black person is bilingual if they want to be. They know how to speak with white people when they want to get something done, and they know how to speak in their own neighborhood. Can you walk into their neighborhood and speak to the brothers like they actually are your brothers and have them feel you? That's what the question is, and that's what the answer is. If you can answer that question, then you can represent whoever you want. You could represent me if you can answer that question. But the first thing I'm going to ask you is, hey, man, did you read that Wahida Clark book? What did you think about, what is that? Be More Careful. What's the name of the book? The sister from Baltimore. Forget it. But in any event, I'm going to ask you those kind of questions. I'm going to ask you about Dutch. I might ask you about W.E.B. Du Bois or Malcolm X. Just to see. I might ask you about raw law, for heaven's sakes. Tell you a funny story. I had a detective take the witness stand in a case, and he's telling the jury about my client being this major drug dealer, and they searched his trunk, and it shows he's a member of a gang because he got all these Don Diva magazines in his trunk, and that's a gang magazine. And I'm sitting there with the cover. I got Don Diva magazine because I write for Don Diva magazine. So I said to him, wait a minute, what did you get from that magazine that would make you think it was a gang magazine? Well, I read it from top to bottom as part of my research on gangs, da, da, da. I said, oh, did you read the Raw Law column? He said, I'm not sure I read that one. So I went in my bag, pulled it out, and said, here's a copy of one. I said, turn the page, whatever it was. It said Raw Law. I said, does it say Raw Law there? He said, yeah. I said, do you happen to recognize who that author of that article was? He slumped down his chair. He went from like 6'5" to like 5'2". I said, so that really means you haven't read a darn word about it. And haven't read one word of this magazine. You're just saying that because you found the magazine in a couple of his magazines in the trunk. You don't know anything about gangs. You don't know. By the time I finished with them, he was small. And it also let the jury know that I was writing for this magazine until now the magazine was taken out of the gang literature in their mind. You know, because at least that day I had some credibility. A lot of days you don't have credibility when you're a lawyer, you know. So, but that day I did because of that stupid mistake and the cop trying to play hero. In any event, represent the kids, but represent the kids, knowing the communities they come from. Here's another one. I got arrested by a cop. He didn't read me my rights. This is our discussion next week, within the next 2 weeks, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to prepare you with some introductory law before we get into the teeth of what it is to try a case. All right, so I'll give you tidbits of what it's like to be in a courtroom, but I'll give you some law. So I'm hoping you're taking notes because I'm going to come back to you with more than tidbits. I'm going to come back to you with law. All right. This question is going to be our out question. And that question is this. I got arrested, but the cop didn't read me my rights. What can I do? Frankly, there's not a lot you can do. I don't think you can do anything. That's probably a good thing, unless, of course, you confess. You're only entitled to have your Miranda rights. That's what you're talking about. Your Miranda rights read to you once you're arrested and if you give a statement or if you're going to give a statement. So most smart cops won't even read you your rights. They'll let you talk in the hope that you'll say something that's incriminating. And the minute you say something like, I was only out there for 10 minutes, that 10-minute time frame they know is the time frame of the crime. And they'll say, oh, wait a minute. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you because what you volunteer is not subject to Miranda. They can use that against you. So they won't read you your rights until you start opening up your big mouth. The minute you start talking, and most kids who are convicted in the criminal justice system are convicted out of their own mouths by virtue of the things that they say or do, whether they be too loud or they admit to something, that wasn't me. That was, I had a blue jacket on that day. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, that's bullshit. I got a client, murder case. He goes in, cops call him, he's on a drug. They tell him they're investigating a drug case. He knows he's a hustler. He ain't concerned about that. But it's really a homicide they're looking for. So they say, they ask him all these questions about drugs. And he think he getting his thing off with the cops. And he said, well, look, give us a number where we can contact you at. And he gives him his cell phone number. When the murder trial, when he gets indicted for murder, and you look through the discovery, guess what they did? They took his cell phone number and they pinged it because the person who was murdered was being followed by another car. That car was communicating with another shooter, and they pinged it the exact same route that this person was going, of a number that he gave him thinking that he was being cute. If he don't say anything about, well, what phone? I ain't got no cell phone. I'm not want to talk to cops about no cell phone. Keep his mouth shut. They never are able to connect him to this homicide. That's what happens. So if anything you volunteer comes in against you, if they read you your Miranda and you then give it, nothing you can do about it. You consented to that. But if they don't read you your Miranda rights, the only time that it matters is if you gave a statement. Keep your mouth shut. You have the right to remain silent. They tell you that all the time. But what they follow that up with is, and this is my out, anything you say can and will be used against you. I'm going to show you next week how that's done in a courtroom. I might even cross-examine you on that. Again, every Thursday night, we're holding class. Those of you who really want to know what they're doing to you, really want to know what's going on in the courtroom, this is the place to be. This is called the Raw Law Project. We're about ready to get real on this. This is, like I said, this is the introduction. But this is like the appetizer. The meat and potatoes is on its way. So get yourself ready, strap yourself down, because if you don't know, now you know. Thank you for coming. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm on my way home. Somebody get me a cab.